Bentornati al Digitaletics Forum, siamo alla nostra ultima sessione, la sessione è dedicata agli ospiti che provengono da altri paesi, quindi sarà una sessione in inglese e tra pochi minuti appunto andremo a iniziare quest'ultima parte. Il tema sarà le prospettive industriali in Europa dal punto di vista del mercato digitale e abbiamo appunto purtroppo un ospite in meno che è Chris Adams della Green Web Foundation che non sarà con noi e quindi credo che a questo punto potremo cominciare. So I will switch to English now and welcome everybody. And I will start presenting our remote guests, Thorsten, Jonas, Sophie Dembisky. Hi Thorsten, hi Sophie, and Laurent Deverny. Hi Laurent, nice to see you all. And so the first question is for all of you, and the order of the answer is please Thorsten, Sophie, and Laurent. So the first question is introduce, of course, yourself in few words, and let's start answering this question. Sustainability in services and products is a nice to have or a must have? Share your thoughts with the audience and one or two practical experiences, if possible, and showing how a sustainable approach has increased the profit or the stability of your organization. Thank you.
Yeah. At first, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure actually to join this nice group of people here. So I'm Thorsten Jonas. I'm the founder of the Sustainable UX Network, or SUX Network as we call it. That's a nonprofit initiative and global community focusing on sustainability in design and UX. So how can we make design and UX more sustainable, and how can we use that actually to build and design more sustainable digital services and products? And so I run this community. I do a lot of talks and workshops and trainings about these topics and try to not only spread the word actually for digital sustainability, but also trying to enable people and organizations to incorporate that into their work. I'm also one of the people writing the Web Sustainability Guidelines at the moment at the W3C. And yeah, I have a strong background in digital. I worked in a digital agency for many years and built lots of digital products. So did lots of hands-on work. But for meanwhile 5 years, I think I'm fully focusing on digital sustainability. And regarding your question, and if digital sustainability is a nice to have or not, well, obviously it's not a nice to have, and I want to share two examples or ideas about that. The first one is there's a very interesting number saying that up to 90% of all the data, of all the contents that is stored in the internet actually is not used at all. So nobody's using it, it's just there, but it's stored on actively running servers. So servers that need a lot of energy, that therefore cause a lot of carbon emissions, they need a lot of water actually for cooling, so that make a huge resource impact, but that also cost a lot of money actually. And there is the business case, I think. So just imagine we could get rid of, let's say, 25% of these useless data. How much of an impact would that be, right? Thinking about, I think the carbon impact of data centers, meanwhile, is something about 2% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the dimensions we are actually talking about. And I think the cool thing here is that it's not like a super big project to start digital sustainability, but you can start pretty easy with small things. And I want to share two things from projects I did. So I did a project with the university in Copenhagen. They asked me, so they rebuilt their whole web environment at the moment, and they asked me, hey Thorsten, since you are one of the people writing the Web Sustainability Guidelines, can you help us to consider sustainability in our project from the very beginning. So I help them not only from a design perspective, but from all kinds of perspective. And so one interesting finding that we had is, and what I learned there is that universities have, on the university web pages, have hundreds of subpages and hundreds of content editors that create these subpages. Most of them relevant maybe for one semester because it's for a course or for a class. So they are producing hundreds, thousands of pages that are obsolete after just a few months. And so one thing that we did there is we established a very simple process. So once a year, the usage numbers of all subpages are monitored monitored. And if the number of a page is very low, let's say below 10 page views or something per year, then the content editor of this page gets an automatic email that says, hey, nobody's watching at your page. If you do not interfere, we will automatically depublish and then later delete your page. So very simple process that helps to get rid of lots of unnecessary contents and data. And that is also a business case because, as I just said, right, all these data needs servers that needs to be paid by someone. So that's one example. And the second example for an even easier quick win. So looking at the page, we saw that they have a page showing all the master's programs, right? So pretty important page. Many people look there and look for master's programs. And so this page had on the top had a search field and in the background had a background video. So it was not necessary. It did not transport any information. It was just decoration. If you use one of the popular carbon estimation tools that are meanwhile pretty good, actually, you found out that 75% of the page weight are coming from this background video. And if you make an estimation, that's up to maybe 4 grams of CO2 per page view just because of the video. So just by changing that, you could, and I don't have the exact number in mind, but something between 500 kilograms and 1 ton of CO2 per year could be saved just by getting rid of this background video. So sometimes it's these very small things that already make an impact. And so from my experience, the cool thing is, or at first, digital sustainability is necessary. It's necessary for the planet, for the future, but it's also a business case. And there are very often very simple quick wins where you can start. So it's not like a huge simple project. You can easily build that into your project or product reality and just start with it easily without too much additional effort. So it's worth it, it's easy, and it's a business case. So yes, we definitely have to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thorsten. And Sophie, can you go ahead? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Lovely to be here today. Thank you for having me. My name is Sophie. I am the head of public policy at Ecosia. I also run the UK and US markets. For those of you who don't know, Ecosia is essentially a search engine that dedicates 100% of its profit to fighting climate change. We can go into greater depth on that. We have about 20 million users around the world, and we have funded probably the largest number of trees in the world. So it's a fantastic company to be part of and representing today. In terms of the question around is sustainability kind of a nice to have, for me, no, it's not a nice to have, like Thorsten said. For me, it's very much a prerequisite because of the scale of the challenge that we are facing on climate change. So to omit the kind of the parameters of today in terms of tipping points, etc., is not true innovation. I would say it doesn't. You're not taking today's context into your design and innovation, and therefore I think that's not only a problem for the actual thing that you're trying to build. It's also a problem because actually, despite what many people will want us to think at this time, 89% of people, according to a recent study in The Guardian, do want more to be done on climate from their governments, from key kind of movers and shakers in society. And if you do not kind of listen to that as you build whatever you're trying to build, you're actually not listening to a very large consumer group there. And actually, it's therefore really important to understand that this is something that concerns people that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis around the world. So it's delivering, if you want to deliver real value, not just in your product, you must also be thinking about sustainability as an opportunity, not a constraint. It is not a constraint for us. It's quite the opposite. It's a competitive advantage. I don't think Ecosia without the offering to reforest the planet, which is our mission, and to dedicate 100% of our profits into climate action, would have made as much of a dent, and it's a very small dent still, into the search market. This is our USP. This is what we do. We would want others to do what we do, of course, because we do have a small market share, but we need to demonstrate that, or rather, we are catering to the many Europeans and people around the world who do believe that tech companies can do more, and they want to feel part of the climate movement while they're searching the web. So, it's not, for me, it's not nice to have. It's absolutely fundamental to our business model. And we would, I would hope that other companies would feel and see the opportunity that exists there.
Great, Sophie. Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. So, Laurent, can you please go ahead? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Laurent. I've been working on web projects for 20 years or something like that. And I've been committed to digital sustainability for the last 7 years. I'm currently working at a company called Green Spector, which point is to offer a tool to assess the environmental impacts of digital services. And I'm also involved with W3C, the Web Almanac, and other repositories for best practices. So regarding your question, I agree that sustainability is mandatory for digital services, but I think sometimes we also need to shift left, because I think that digital is not a must-have for all products and services. I'm currently doing a critical review for the ADEME, the French Agency for Environment and the Energy, which have been running LCAs on many use cases related to digital, such as remote working, tire as a service, public lights, and things like this. And so far, the conclusion is that the environmental benefits of digitalization has been highly overestimated in these use cases. And I think the question is ever more relevant now with AI, that we see companies trying to add AI everywhere. And it causes many issues beyond environmental issues like security, privacy, and things like this. So yes, sustainability is mandatory, but before making sure that our digital services are sustainable, accessible, and so on, we must make sure that they are really needed.
Thank you, Laurent. So I go ahead with the second question, going more deeper into the topic of a sustainable European digital industry. And the question is, please share with the audience an example of building a pan-European digital service or a digital product using a bottom-up or a cross-industry company approach. So the main question is, are, let's say, the gatekeepers the only way to go, or there are alternatives? And please, the order is Sophie, you have about 15 minutes to answer. If you want, and then Laura and Thorsten. So let's change a little bit the order. Thanks.
Okay, I don't think I will speak for 15 minutes, but I can just give a little bit of a flavor.
Yeah.
In terms of our experience of building digital services across Europe, and the contribution of citizens to that. As I mentioned, we have about 20 million users at Ecosia. Many of them are, in European capitals, European cities, and countries, member states, and they have been absolutely fundamental to helping us grow. Their dedication to the kind of green transition and the green values of the European Union are what has allowed us to grow. And that's also because it can be quite difficult to find and install Ecosia. And there are various barriers which we are slowly overcoming, and the EU is helping us overcome. And indeed, regulators around the world are helping us kind of unlock as we understand more and more about how the digital ecosystems are built, how people can be locked in to them and how their choices are reflected in the apps they download and use, or not actually. And I think that's been really key, because in order to have citizens and cross-industry kind of approaches, there's a lot of education that needs to happen about how the internet, at least in our case, how the search market works, which is not obvious. So that is very key. You know, the EU is the world's largest single market, with 450 million consumers or citizens. And when that can be unlocked, there's a huge potential for growth for companies. But as I mentioned, there are a number of challenges which have, over the last 6 years that I've been at Ecosia, been very interesting to kind of engage with, to try to help citizens support projects like Ecosia. Like I said, it's not always easy. In our case, you know, when people use Ecosia, every search that they make is essentially a choice, to kind of almost a donation to the planet. Actually, it's a form of kind of participatory climate action at scale, which is why we wanted to create Ecosia, to create a sustainable revenue stream to go into climate projects and not be dependent on kind of grants and this kind of thing. So European citizens, in terms of that question around what is the contribution of kind of at the pan-European level of citizens, you know, they are active contributors to reforesting the planet, helping us fund renewable energy projects by using Ecosia. It's a choice. It's not necessarily a political choice, but we need a diversity of options for people to choose from, that reflect their values, and that's really important. Now, in terms of the underlying infrastructure of that, the way that we built Ecosia did and does continue to rely on gatekeepers and partners, as well as competitors, because that is the nature of how that there are significant barriers to entry in the search market. But we are also now investing in European digital sovereignty ourselves. We launched something called the European Search Perspective with a French search engine called Quant last year. And the idea is really built on the kind of the principle of collaboration here. So we created something called STAN, which is the Search Trusted API Access Network, which is it's not just a kind of a search index, but it's rather a shared foundation for other European tech companies, startups, developers to be able to access the web data rather ethically and independently. So the idea is to create kind of a commons to some degree around here, and not just to be reliant on monopolies, etc., but to create a kind of this European independence to some degree, which is really fundamental to our potential, our ability to continue to grow as well. So the DMA helped us a lot. There are still many things that we are yet to realize from the DMA, but this is one step further. In a recent paper by Noema, this idea of the democratization of infrastructure that Francesca Bria mentions. This is something where the digital commons are built by and for the citizens, not just by shareholders. And for us, as a steward-owned company, as a purpose-driven company, Ecosia believes that this is where digital infrastructure kind of needs to go, right? It should be for the people and for the planet, which is what we've always focused on. So for us, this is really important. So in terms of that question, yes, for us, building digital services has always relied on the contribution and the kind of commitment of citizens to live their values. In this case, it's about the climate. It hasn't always been easy for them to do that. It continues to be a challenge. We miss things like kind of one-click switches and easy ways for people to select Ecosia. It's rather difficult to do that sometimes. And through a kind of a cross-industry approach and kind of a international kind of European approach by working with Quant, the French search engine, we're now also building out a kind of a new venture which will help to for us to kind of collaborate more together with Quant through the European Search Perspective. It's Franco-German joint venture, which is really exciting. So hopefully that will help to support citizens' engagement in our initiative in Europe, but also to encourage or to allow others to be able to access our infrastructure and create a kind of a more democratic kind of infrastructure within Europe, with a more diversity of views and offerings.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So let's go ahead with Laurent.
Yes, I think I see two main aspects for this. The first is, I've been working as a consultant on many various projects in many contexts, and I see that most of the time the needs of the users, they come back to sustainability. We used to have big companies which solutions must work with users on the train or on the plane, or more specific applications that would work for users running in the mountains or things like this. And in the end, it always comes to, I need my solution to work on an old device with a bad connectivity and so on. And if we want to have solutions that can reach all users, we must have these types of considerations. It also includes accessibility, obviously, and security. And for this, what we lack currently is a repository of best practices. There are some things coming like the RGESN, the French repository of eco-design best practices, which has been submitted to the BEREC, so the European institution for certification and things like this and regulations. We've got the Web Sustainability Guidelines that are getting traction, but I think in such a context of climate change, there is no such thing as competition of countries. People must learn how to work together, but to work together, we see in France and Europe that we must, most of the time, get rid of the old big monopolies like the Microsoft solutions and things like this. And it occurred to us first when the GDPR appeared in 2018, because many companies discovered that they had dependencies in the US because there were services or servers in the US, and it didn't work with GDPR. It causes issues. So we need to find some solution for this. And I hope that most of our solutions will come from open source solutions, because if open source is not automatically sustainable, I think that if we make sustainability open source, we can help more people. So I'm deeply convinced that there's something to dig with this. And also we need that everyone agrees on how we measure digital services, how we assess environmental impacts, and it's a necessity for people to talk about the same thing. When you've got big companies telling you, we will be net zero by 2030, we will be water positive, and other people are telling you, my page is 5 grams of CO2. Another with the same page will tell you it's 0.5 grams. We need to make everyone agree on the same things. There are some initiatives, official initiatives going on in France, in Europe. It will take some time, but I think that with everyone working together, this is achievable, and it needs to be achievable because we are running out of time for these considerations.
Thank you, Laurent. And then Jonas.
Yeah, well, there is not too much to add for me, but I want to maybe try to add another perspective, because Sophie, you said something very interesting. You said, and I noted that it's hard to find and install Ecosia, right? And I think the big trick of the gatekeepers of the big platforms is that they make us all believe that there is no alternative, though there are alternatives, right? All the people use the term Googling. We should get rid of that, for example, right? In the end, it begins with the narratives, with the stories that drives us, which is funny because we always say we live in a data-driven world. If we are honest, it's not true. We live in a narrative-driven world, because in the end, the narrative always beats the data. Otherwise, we wouldn't debate the climate catastrophe if we are honest. So the question is, how can we find the better narratives? How can we explain to all the people out there, hey, there are alternatives? So for me, it's no, big monopolies are not the only way. I believe in the power of the people, right? And Sophie, you said before that most people want to do more against the climate catastrophe. And I also read about this research, and what I found really interesting is that when people were asked, why don't you do more, they say, hey, I think I am in the minority. So the majority thinks they are the minority, right? So there are many people who want to do better, who want to do good, who want to do the right thing. So how can we enable them? And I think creating transparency about the true negative impacts of this stuff that we are using would be a first step, right? So big tech lured us into their platforms with the narrative of convenience, and that more convenience is better. And I think we need to get to a point and explain or find the right narratives to explain people, hey, it's worse to maybe accept a little bit less convenience. It's still super nice then to do something, but a little bit less convenience has a huge impact, a positive impact actually on many other ends, because there are many European alternatives to services that we use. It's just like nobody knows about them, right? So again, we need to bring this to the people, because in the end, and that's something I use very often in my talks, in the end, every choice that every single one of us is a decision for one possible future, right? And I think we need to enable the people to make these decisions, to decide, hey, I want to use Ecosia instead of something else. And I think there are still many things we could do. And then there is not a monopoly necessary, so not a counter monopoly necessary, but we need more transparency, and we need to create the right stories, the right narratives to be the false magical narratives of these utopian AI world that all the US companies want to tell us. And I strongly believe that that we have a huge chance actually on this end, and I have lots of hope there.
Thank you. And Pietro needs to. Yeah, please. Okay. Okay.
Just to break this sequence and to add a bit of humor, Jonas. Thank you very much. Yes, narrative is everything. I think the problem we have today is that we don't have words, for instance, to describe the size of techno empires which have been created. We still use the word monopoly or oligopolies, but those are terms from, I think, 200 years ago, if not more. And what we see today are monster poly. No, we should craft new words, because otherwise we cannot describe the world we are living in. And yes, I let you reply, interject, please. And the other point I want to make with you, because you are much younger than me, you lived during decades where democracy and votes created the myth that the change is due to the majority of people. And if you do not have the majority, you cannot have change. But history shows that the change occurs when a strong minority, well-determined, which might be 4% of the population, 5%, very often below 10% of the population, makes the change because he is determined. I do believe, and I hope that your generation will.
I would love to add something to that.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Thorsten, please answer. Then we have another reply.
At first of you
Jonas,
said,
sorry, may you answer after my little brief intervention?
Yeah, sure.
So
please.
I want to I want to give strength to your position, and I'm proud to remember what Mark Fisher said about the realism of capitalism and the impossibility to imagine that the situation can change. So he said that it's easier to imagine the end of the world instead of the end of capitalism. So it's the same paradigm that we can apply to environmental change at this moment. The mainstream, I hate to use this word, but I think it's sufficient enough to describe what I want to say. Tend to make us think that no environmental change is possible, or however, no one of us can do anything by himself to change this situation. So it's something of deeply political and not theoretical that has to be put in place to change the situation. This is, I want to say, to strengthen your position. Thanks.
Thank you. And I just want to add two things. First, when you said, okay, we don't have the words. So the experience that I make is that we need to find very simple personal stories that we can incept into the minds of people. One example that I use very often in my talk. So I love going mountaineering in the mountains, which is funny because I'm from Hamburg and we don't have mountains here. So that's a little bit sad for me, but that's another story. And I always show an image from my mountaineering tours. And then I show a second image actually that shows how the glaciers are melting. So in fact, it's an image where you can see a little lake, and this lake is pretty new because just a few years ago, there was still a glacier tongue where now the lake is. So, and then a little bit later in my talks, I tell people, hey, guess what? 230 ChatGPT prompts cost approximately 1 kilogram of CO2. 1 kilogram of CO2 costs us 15 kilogram of glacier ice. I'm creating a very simple, and it's close to a maybe populistic narrative that I create there. Still, I think it's okay. And what I experience all the time is that this sticks to the people. So I think we need to find these simple stories, these simple words actually, that people take home from wherever we talk to them. And I strongly believe in the effect of that. So simplification is dangerous, but we need to find the simple stories actually, and we need to sometimes become a little bit populistic in a positive way to bring this to the people. And yeah, so that's a personal experience that I make from the many talks that I give. And another thing that we should not forget is that I think I used the term the power of the people. And if you remember when the show of Jimmy Kimmel was taken off air because he made too much jokes about Donald Trump. And so Disney has seen that many people actually how to say that? So stopped using Disney Plus, their streaming service, and they had these little form field where people could say why they are stopping using the service. And so after just a few days, they took the form offline because so many people stopped using the service because of the Jimmy Kimmel incident. And well, Jimmy Kimmel came back on air, which is for me an example that yes, if we can mobilize people, actually there is a lot of power, and there is more power than the big tech platforms or media platforms actually have. So yes, I stick to that. I have a lot of hope, and that we can mobilize the people, but we need to find the right words, as you said. But I think we are able to.
Thank you, Thorsten. I personally also use some kind of let's say jokes for the companies where we share carbon footprint. For example, if inside the company there's maybe a garden or something like a green point or a green angle, I used to see what plants are planted in this garden, and then when I measure the website carbon emission, I used to say, well, you have to build 2 or 3 of your gardens only to absorb the CO2 of your website. And so it's something that company finds intelligent and keeps the cloud to the ground. And also another side of the story of the, let's say, the narrative part of our work, it's that in the last months I realized I too often compare the website to data dumps or thousands of tons of rubbish that are stored in our databases. But I think that this is not good for example, young IT departments, because this does not give to that developers hopes for the future, because they give the idea that the website or the software is to completely delete or remove. It's rubbish. It's not something that we can somehow restore in some way or cure. And that's why I used to think in the last months that the similitude or the terms that I use are more correct, because I used to think that the website needs to be cultivated. It gives the idea that the website now, for example, is not so good, is ill, maybe it has some issues, and you need to take care of it, like, for example, a plant or something that is that lives, and this gives to the developers perspective in the future, and they take care with more enthusiasm of their software, of their website. So also this narrative, I think, is important, not only the negative impact, but a positive perspective for the future. Sophie, Laurent, do you want to add something?
I could just quickly jump in. I think you're talking about the developer side. I think from our side, when we saw after talking specifically about, and I completely agree with you, monopoly does not perhaps sum up the information that gatekeepers have about users across many different platforms, the not just the data, but what we see on social media sites, and how it's the targeted ads can affect society at large. It's a very all-encompassing problem for our society today, and it seeps very much into our civic lives in many ways. I think we saw in January after the inauguration, we did see an increase of people looking for alternatives to big tech. Let's put it that way, and it shows that, as Thorsten was saying, I also feel very hopeful. I think that people are starting to educate themselves about their choices. The way I always describe kind of a mobile phone is a bit like a high street. How you navigate your phone, which apps you choose to use and spend time on. It's like walking down a high street and going into different shops, and where you choose to spend your time and money really matters. The high streets are always changing around us. I'm based in London, and in the UK, the high streets are changing a lot. With different consumer preferences, different ways that people spend money. Your apps are kind of a similar kind of reflection, right? And there are sometimes that you want to download an app and you can't find it, or you go to try to get into a shop, but the doors are locked, right? There are many different ways in which the ecosystem digitally kind of could almost be imagined as if it was a real life experience. And people are now trying to look for different alternatives to the high street chains, maybe. And they're starting to understand how damaging they can be, perhaps, or and looking for alternatives. And there are different reasons why that's happening now, but certainly, especially young people are educating themselves. Lots of influencers are talking about choice online. And for Ecosia, we've always wanted to provide a sense of empowerment to users in the face of climate change, but perhaps now on other issues as well. where you can feel like you're taking, you're taking a small act that you're going to do anyway, which is search the web, and they will know that that the profits will not go towards funding billionaires' lifestyles, but actually into securing a climate safe future for them, for future generations. So I think that, for Ecosia users, it's kind of like a little act of not rebellion or, but perhaps actually like it's an empowering way to make a statement. And so yes, we do have a kind of we can see different trends happening depending on what's going on in the world. But as somebody else mentioned earlier, indeed, the kind of the great competitor here is convenience, because what you see as a default setting on your phone, most people are actually not curious enough to look beyond the default settings, and not tech savvy enough to get around certain barriers that are put in place. But for those who do know how to do that, I think Ecosia and other companies are providing some form of solace in the wake of what is an increasing kind of recognition of the connectedness between big tech, inequality, growing inequality around the world, and systemic challenges that we're starting to really see kind of rear their ugly heads. So lots of hope, I think, lots of challenges still, but definitely a shimmer of light, I think.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And maybe we can go with the last question, also because Sophie needs to quit at 6 p.m. if I don't remember. Oh, okay. And so let's start with Sophie. I sent you before our roundtable the link of a paper that was written by Francesca Bria. The title was Reclaiming Europe Digital Sovereignty. And this paper talks about the Eurostack project. And so what is your first reaction around this paper and around the Eurostack project in general? And did it inspire you? Does it miss the point? What are the hopes around this project and so on?
It absolutely inspires us, and it's much needed. I mean, we are active in this kind of initiative for the reasons I mentioned earlier, to create a competitive option in the search space has not been easy, and we have been reliant on existing critical infrastructure. For better or worse, I mean, it's allowed us to enter the market and create a movement and an option for people who are worried about the climate crisis. But indeed, it's also has its challenges, and indeed, it's certainly not European. And we are a European company based in Berlin, and it would be helpful for us to have more options to choose from. In this case, we're talking about the search index. So the Eurostack is absolutely needed. It's incredibly timely. In fact, perhaps it could have come a few years before. I think now we're seeing the need for kind of radical action here, and the need to reduce our dependencies on critical technologies around the world. I mean, from other places is incredibly clear. So we have to foster a better European kind of more competitive European digital market and options for productivity, growth, and security. Absolutely. So I agreed with everything that was in the paper, and as I mentioned, we are very active in this debate. I would also say that there is a lot of positive momentum here. I think the important thing is not to forget that Europe has a lot of norms and values, of which the not just the digital transition but the green transition is part of it. And this is something that we are trying to put forward, that we have a digital solution that is also, or a digital option that is also green, and more than just green, it's a kind of carbon positive. When you use Ecosia, you're adding green energy back into the grid. You're reforesting the planet. There are many other things that you're doing at the same time. So it's a holistic response, and the Eurostack, I think, needs to bring that kind of holistic approach to its thinking. I think it is already doing it. The goal of it is to create sovereignty. not just through regulation, but through active kind of investment into key infrastructure. We absolutely believe that's the way to do it. And Ecosia is a green option within the Eurostack options. For us, steward-owned companies and governance to prevent monopolies is really important as well, beyond the Eurostack ideas. I mean, we recently, I don't know if you saw, we kind of made the headlines when we offered to take stewardship of Chrome, if indeed in the recent case in the US, if the judge would have ruled to have broken up Google, there were quite a few different companies that offered to buy it, like Perplexity and others, and we were saying, well, it shouldn't just such infrastructure should go to the planet. It shouldn't just go back into the hands of kind of more billionaires. That won't improve competition, choice, or indeed the situation on climate change. So we made this kind of suggestion that actually it would be better steward-owned governance to prevent the kind of control by one actor would actually be a really good idea. This kind of thing could be a bottom-up kind of approach to the Eurostack as well. A renewable energy powering some of the solutions that are being presented, as well as open access, for example, and shared infrastructure. So there's many things that the Eurostack could provide as a kind of public good, not just a kind of private race, I suppose. But it's for us, it's an incredibly important moment for Europe now to kind of step into its power and really champion the incredible innovation that exists on this continent, and help companies that want to contribute to this to the European vision and project grow. So we are at the forefront of this idea. We've always been a European kind of a European-born innovative company that put the green and digital transition in the center of everything that it does. So we absolutely advocate for more companies to do the same, and for the Eurostack to start to be adopted more widely across Europe, not just from Brussels, but to make it a European initiative. So it's a very positive initiative, we believe.
Thank you, Sophie. And Thorsten and Laurent, if you want to add something.
Sure. Or do you want to go, Laurent? I was well, yes to everything that Sophie already said. I really like it. I strongly believe we need it. And so maybe since Sophie said all the good things already, I want to add one more perspective from the usage side, because there was one very nice sentence, not so nice sentence in the article, and I noted that down. Building alternatives means little if European firms continue defaulting to ChatGPT, right? So it's the one thing that we build this, and it's the other thing, how can we make businesses to use this, right? If I just read, I don't know, 4 weeks ago that Germany gets its Germany GPT, and in the end, it's again ChatGPT that is the underlying tech stack, then I feel like, what the heck is going on? How can you? Right? And so I think, again, we also need to not only build the technology, we need to convince people, and in this case, not people, but organizations, companies, that it's worth using these things, even if it's maybe a little less powerful at the moment. And we need to create transparency on why it really means not to have digital sovereignty, because I think most people are not aware of that. There was just a few weeks ago, I think, a case, was it in France, where someone from the parliament, so they asked Microsoft, hey, can you guarantee the sovereignty of French people's data on Microsoft servers located in France? And Microsoft answered, no, we cannot, because it doesn't matter where the servers are located as long as they are in control of a US company, because the US company falls under the Cloud Act, and if Trump says, give me the data, they have to hand out the data. I'm pretty sure most people and most companies are not aware of that. And something that I see, so I also speak a lot of AI, right? And about the sustainability and AI, but also take the turn and speak about the business risk, because I see a high business risk in using all these things uninformed, and I'm pretty sure most people and decision makers and managers are not aware of this, but I also believe that's maybe a narrative how I can touch them, right? How I can point them and say, hey, are you aware of the risk that is there?
Yeah.
So that is also a big chance, I think, that we need to take, right? So we need to build it, and we need again to build the stories and make people use the stuff that we already have or that we are building.
Yeah. This is also my opinion. So we need to run business risks analysis in terms of these softwares that we use every day, and what are the risks for the companies in terms of data, let's say, stolen or similar, and what are the consequences for that company not investing in, let's say, GDPR compliant providers in general. So thank you very much. Laurent, do you want to add something?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we should also try to, well, we already mentioned this, but educate kids, teenagers about all this. I don't know for other countries, but in France, kids have to learn how to use a computer starting in kindergarten, which means the kid is maybe 5 or 6. He discovers computer and then it's Windows, straight Windows. And I can't understand why towns, schools keep using a solution that is costly and that makes your computers disposable. That's nonsense. That is also complicated when you've got alternatives that are free, that are usable, and that are more relevant. And it's the same thing for everything they do in school. I mean, you're discovering the web. Here is Google, here is Chrome, and it's not logical. It doesn't make any sense. And on the other side, when we've got issues with digital services from outside of Europe, we've got all the regulations. We've got the DSA, the DMA, the GDPR, everything you want, but they don't take it into account, and they keep doing this. We know that TikTok is bad for teenagers, that it causes mental issues, suicides, scarification, and things like this. We know that we've got these issues, and still we do nothing. I don't mean that a European social network would be necessarily better, but we need also to leverage some power, some authority on outside digital services, on digital services from outside, because when we try to raise awareness about this, when I talk to kids, teenagers in school, and ask them, how much time do you spend each day, each week on your phone? And you hear the answers like, oh yes, between 8 and 15 hours. They all realize that's an issue with this. When you talk about them and realize that you change the phone every 6 months and every year, there's a big issue here. And we need to give solutions to empower people to use the right tools for them, because I feel like we're struggling to keep using solutions for Microsoft, to keep using social networks, even if we know it's bad for us, even if we know we have excuses to keep using them, but it's more like Stockholm syndrome, in my opinion. So we need to, like everyone said, we need to have good narratives to promote tools that have the planet and the people in mind, to make sure not to harm them. And I'm sure they already exist, but we need to talk about this, starting with kids for the next generations, and make sure that they will not be in the same default work as we have. Like, I have always used Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and so on. And I don't have the time to see for alternatives. When you see ChatGPT that tells you, if we want to be profitable in the end, we have to make it, I think it's $250 per month for the users to keep using ChatGPT, and ChatGPT still being profitable. Maybe then people will decide to go elsewhere and stop using ChatGPT, but I'm not even sure they will make this decision. Otherwise, I think people are getting addicted to these tools. The famous 5-fold, 10-fold productivity with AI. You start with free tools and then you can't work without them, or the competition will get better than you. Young people will be better than you. We have to stop with these capitalistic narratives to start on the right fit.
Yeah, I think so. So that's a problem of narratives, and there's a problem of the fact that we have fear of changing our default behaviors. So we always used Microsoft as an OS for our computers, and we have fear to test Linux or open source initiatives just because we know there are alternatives, but we have fear of changing our default attitudes. I know that Sophie needs to quit, but we are closing the panel. And so thank you very much. Let's keep in touch, everybody, with the next initiatives. And I promise that the next forum will be not on zoom.us. And so we will plan to use another alternative European platform. And we have, I think, the technical skills to implement this also inside this room directly. And so it's not a problem of technicalities, it's a problem of attitudes and so on, as we already said. And so we will try to change narratives and also attitudes. Thank you very much, everybody, again. If you want to add something else.
No, just to say that's a great idea, and we look forward to joining on that platform next year.
Yeah. Any question from the public? No comment? No. Okay. So have a nice evening, everybody, and let's see you again next year. Bye.
See you again next year. Bye-bye.
Bye.